Welcome to Around the Track, the most exciting 15 minutes in wealth management by Dynasty Financial Partners and hosted by CEO Shirl Penney.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Around the Track, the most exciting 15 minutes in wealth management. I'm your host, Shirl Penney, founder and CEO of Dynasty Financial Partners. And I'm very excited to be joined today by a good friend of both mine as well as Dynasty, Anand Sekhar, who is the Vice President of Practice Management and Consulting at Fidelity. Anand, thank you so much for joining us today.
Shirl, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Look, before we jump in, I just want to quickly say thank you to all your colleagues at Fidelity as well. You guys have been just amazing partners to us from the very early days of Dynasty. So thank you so much for that. Now, look, you know the rules. We only have one rule on Around the Track, and we're going to quickly make our way around in less than 15 minutes, the virtual track that's behind me. I'm going to ask you 8 questions. Each of the 8 questions represents 1 furlong, 8 furlongs in a mile to make our way around the mile track. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump in. I'm going to give you an easy one so we can break out of the gate, the right way together today.
And they're off.
Just tell us a little bit about yourself, personally and professionally.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Charlotte, again for the opportunity. So a few things about me personally. So I started, I was actually a chemical engineer at Procter & Gamble years ago. A few people know that. I still do that on the side, brewing beer. But for the most part, I love and get great pleasure and joy my day-to-day job, really helping be a catalyst for transforming the businesses that we have the pleasure of working with. So that's getting them to think differently about different things, whether it's diversity, inclusion, their clients, their business development efforts. It's a lot of different aspects. And I'll tell you, outside of work, I have a huge passion for financial literacy. So my wife and I do a lot with our church and that area. So those are sort of, my passions inside work. It's helping, really just help our clients think differently about their business, and then therefore hopefully help them think about change and how they can perhaps evolve their firm in different ways. And then outside of work, similarly, helping individuals and families think about how they might change their finances and the way they think about their money. So that's what I get passion and a lot of interest in doing.
Awesome. So look, you mentioned diversity and inclusion there. So I want to highlight a while back, you had joined our Chief Diversity Officer and our Head of Marketing, Gordy Abel, for a webinar on diversity and inclusion. Where do you see some opportunities for the wealth management space to become more inclusive and diverse as an industry?
I love the fact that you started with inclusive, because I think we have an opportunity first to start there, which is, before you can go hire diverse candidates, you have to have an inclusive organization that's going to be welcoming and receive those potential candidates. And too often we might have cultures that are dated that just don't represent perhaps what individuals might be, a more diverse population is looking for. So I'll give you just one simple example of inclusion, which is, do I have a voice? Do I have a voice? If I come into an organization, regardless of what level in the organization, do I have a seat at the table, a voice in the conversations that might happen, whether it's on everything from the types of products we might offer as a registered investment advisory firm, or it's, what are the types of clients we serve? Do I have a voice in those types of decisions that are being made? You don't have to have a vote, but do you even have a voice? And I think that's important, because if we are going to bring in the next generation of talent that is more diverse, then they likely want to have a voice at the table, and they want to be able to feel like they're included in those types of conversations. And then from a diversity perspective, I often talk about, what are we doing to perhaps unthink all of our legacy around job descriptions and where we're perhaps, looking for new candidates across the board. And so I often talk about, us thinking about social workers, teachers, and nurses as 3 professions where I think we have a lot of diversity and could be good fits based on what I see as being good advisor characteristics, people that are adaptable, people that can learn complicated material, people that are compassionate, empathetic, problem solvers. And I think about all 3 of those professions. That's one example of how we might think about diversity. So, I think it starts with inclusion first, but then for sure, I think we have to evolve how we think about, where we're attracting talent into our industry.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Let me ask you a question around segmentation and client segmentation strategies, because one of the challenges we're seeing with a lot of the firms that we support, the good problem they have is they're growing fast and bringing on clients organically. They're starting to get inorganic strategies put in place as well. But from your seats, I know you work with some of the top firms in the industry. What are you seeing people do from a client segmentation strategy, and how important do you think it is thinking through growth for an RIA firm?
Yeah, so we have a tool called the Client Insight Tool, where we just dive in really deep on a firm's demographics, their profitability, their pricing, so on and so forth. And what we've discovered is a few things. So first off, the average cost to serve a client is about $9,000 for an RIA. Okay, so if the average cost to serve is $9,000, it's about 50% roughly of direct costs, meaning advisor costs, comp, and then 50% back office, fixed costs, so on and so forth, right? So if you think about that, $9,000, what we find is really fascinating is about 50% of the time, they're serving, in essence, their clients in a nonprofit way. Literally 50% of their clients are, in essence, unprofitable. So if you have 100 clients, each advisor, 50 of those 100 are a nonprofit. So that's the first thing. Do you know your cost to serve? Because I don't think enough, I'll ask a room of 100 RIAs, and I think 1 out of 100 will likely know what that cost to serve is until they do this analysis with us. So I think that's the first thing, is do you know your cost to serve? And then the second thing is that how consistent is your pricing to be able to then serve those clients that you believe are your target client base? Now, I believe, and fundamentally, our industry has a responsibility to actually do pro bono financial planning. So I think we should be doing nonprofit work. At the same time, not in the structure of an RIA that costs $9,000 and doesn't have the scale of the financial literacy that's needed more broadly. So I think that is probably the starting point, is that. And then secondarily, what we see is that too often firms are incredibly undisciplined in their smallest clients. So we'll see the standard deviation on pricing larger for small clients than we do for large clients, which doesn't make any sense at all. Like if you're gonna offer variation in our pricing, you should offer it for the largest of the clients, the ultra high net worth, the $10 million plus client. But we see the greatest amount of variation for households that are less than $500,000, which is kind of very, very confusing to us when we look at it. So I think pricing, in addition to profitability, is a starting point. And then the third piece I'll just layer in here is then what do you actually do for those clients when you actually understand what you're who's profitable, what's your pricing. The third and very important component of it is what's your offering, and are you working to delight those clients that are your ideal target client? Our industry is a boutique. Registered investment advisors, let's be clear, you're in a boutique industry. You should have an amazing standard of your base minimum amount of offering. And then how do you differentiate and elevate that experience for perhaps your target and your best clients?
Yeah, at Dynasty, we talk a lot about being fact-based and data-driven. And I love that response. And you started with really, the need to know your numbers. And you talked about the fixed and variable cost. I think a lot of our listeners will find the stats you just shared, quite interesting. So thanks for that. You also talked about scale, right? So we talk about scale, we talk about growth. One of the oftentimes most difficult things for advisors to do is to drive true organic growth, right? So what are some things that you're seeing some of the best firms that you're supporting do to drive organic growth? And oftentimes we're our own worst enemies, if you will. What are some of the biggest challenges facing advisors as they think about driving organic growth?
Yeah, let me talk about first the positive, which is what are the things that are doing well. So I think that the primary source of growth, historically, organic growth, has been 50% of organic growth comes from existing client referrals. So the best firms have, in essence, client evangelists among their client base. And the reason for that is because they have a differentiated client experience. They have a client experience that really drives deep amounts of intimacy and loyalty. They cement that when they solve client problems. So really what happens is you don't go out and ask an existing client for a bunch of names of potential referrals. Really what you do is if you can solve really clients' problems in the worst possible moments in their lives, whether it's a death of a family member, it's the birth of a child, some of the best moments, and most challenging moments as well, like perhaps the challenges of losing somebody. I find that will enable you to cement the relationship long term. And then this is how referrals happen. It's when somebody else, a friend of that client of yours, asks for help with something they're dealing with a life moment. And when that life moment happens and they mention this and unprompted, your client says, I know somebody that can help you navigate that problem. I just lost my family. I just lost my spouse 5 years ago, and my advisor helped me navigate all the estate planning, but then also perhaps even the funeral arrangements and everything else. And then I'll tell you, for the headwinds of growth, this is the biggest issue I see in our industry right now, is many of the advisors we work with, the average revenue weighted age is 65 years old. I'm going to say that again. The revenue weighted age is 65 years old. We have a long left-hand skew of data around the fact that most of the revenue producing clients are older. So why is that a headwind of growth? Well, distributions, withdrawals. If your revenue weighted age is 69, so higher than that average of 65, you know what your organic growth goes to? 1%. That's what our data shows. Your organic growth rate is 1% because you have so much distribution happening if your revenue weighted age. And then on the other side, if your revenue weighted age is 62 years old, your revenue weighted age is 62, your organic growth rate is 10%. Because you have accumulation happening. So my huge opportunity for individuals and advisors that are working out there, and the firms that are behind them, is focus on the next generation of investor. And if you do that, you are going to see this accumulation. Just that alone will help you from an organic growth perspective, in addition to the referral strategies and everything else you're doing.
Got it. All right. So I think that's great advice. Now we're on the backstretch here together now. And let me shift back and ask you about talent, right? Because as leaders, we're all trying to get the right people in the right roles at the right time, doing the right things, but it all starts with talent. So what are in the competition for talent, in the advisory and wealth management space has never been higher. So what are you seeing, again, given the role that you have at Fidelity? What are the best firms doing in terms of attracting, retaining, developing, and growing elite talent within their businesses?
Some of our best run firms right now are, in essence, really thinking beyond just, I think many firms focus on compensation as one example, one lever, right? And when I think about all the levers you can play is that if you focus on compensation, I think that is from a Maslow's hierarchy, you need some of the, it's a basic requirement. You have to be fair and competitive. To go above that is meaning around something such as, are you developing your talent? Are you focused on mentorship? Are you focused on diversity and inclusion? Are you creating that inclusive culture? And then above that is, do you have an alignment from a personal mission perspective on that employee with what your firm mission is? And I'll just give you an example that I think we all appreciate is that nonprofits. If you look at nonprofits, they have some of the biggest evangelist employees that drive talent into their entities, because there's alignment of the personal mission and the company mission. I think the best firms that I've seen have a similar type of culture where they're evangelists internally because they drive a huge amount of connection between the personal mission of that employee and then the firm mission. And so a simple example, our firm mission is to help people's lives, like as an example, and be able to connect that. Can you as an associate actually see that I'm actually helping influence somebody's life trajectory? That's the power of our industry. And I don't think enough firms talk about that and actually lean in on that issue.
All right, I want to circle back to something said just a couple questions ago, because I thought your answer was fascinating in terms of thinking about business valuation and how you grow over time, and the importance of connecting to that next generation of investors. So let me just peel the onion here a little bit. What would you say to advisors that really want to engage that next generation of investors? What should they do differently? How do they stand out? How do they drive that level of engagement?
So I'll give you three simple things. First, foundationally, you have to be engaging the children of your existing clients. Like, that's a foundation. You don't pass go until you're doing that, right? Like, if you're not doing that, you're just missing the 800-pound gorilla within your own client base. So that's first, engage the adult age children of your existing clients. Secondarily, I think you have to start thinking about evolving your practice from a digital marketing perspective, from a digital technology perspective, to meet them where they are. You have to be able to have the product and solutions to be able to meet those investors, those next generation investors. And then the third is probably some innovation. And so I'll give an example, like you need to think about new markets. NIL is a good example, name, image, likeness. For those, those college athletes that might go pro, that's an example. Or thinking about your podcasting or social media. That may be a little more innovative, disruptive for some of you out there, but I think it's evolving your firm beyond perhaps what the traditional things we've seen historically. So again, foundational, what are you doing to engage that next generation of your existing clients? I think thinking about your technology stack, thinking about all the ways you're becoming digital first, and then the products and service. So ESG is a good example of product and service, right? They're going to be more in tune and interested in that. It's an example of, like, I think, evolving your firm and being more where your clients are at. And then lastly, thinking about, how are you going to be innovative and meeting them where they are, even perhaps 5-10 years thinking into the future. And NIL is a good example of that.
Got it. As we've looked at the demographic of the viewers of our show here, most of the people are leaders, whether they're team leaders, they're starting a business for the first time. A number of them have been running a business for a long period of time. So oftentimes I like to ask the guests, to talk a little bit about your leadership style, approach, philosophy, and also maybe there's been a piece of advice that a mentor has given you over the years that stuck with you. So how do you think about leadership as you've evolved your career?
Yeah, it's I've been very blessed to have some amazing mentors that have helped me along my journey, and I think that one of the things that I tried to do when I think about the team that I'm leading is really, most importantly, is to inspire them to do great things. That's what I think about, is what can I do to inspire them to do more than even what I've done. And that's what I think that's the one piece of advice that I've gotten from mentors, and that's what I try to live out is, and then that has to do with, do I ensure that they have a voice? So am I inclusive? Am I collaborative with them, my associates that are on my team? Because if I'm not doing that, then I'm never going to inspire them, right? It's just going to squash them. So those are the types of things. I think that's one thing that has come up from mentors in the past is, what am I doing each day to inspire my team to greatness, and doing, again, more than what I have done in the past.
Okay, that's great. So we've come to our last question. This is the same question that I ask all of the guests on Around the Track. And it's really about that big, almost seemingly unattainable goal that's out there. And the analogy I use within racing is the Triple Crown, right? Being able to win the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness Stakes, and the Belmont. Very difficult to do. And as we're taping this, a lot of the best 3-year-olds in the country are getting ready for that campaign. So as you look out there on the horizon, that big stretch goal, whether it's for you personally, whether it's for you professionally, with Fidelity, what is that Triple Crown moment that you'd be running hard to attain on a go-forward basis?
Yeah, I'll give you my 3, which is, first and foremost, it starts with, I think, so first off, at a macro level, changing hearts and minds in these 3 areas. First, continuing to help our clients move up the value stack. We talk about that a lot. We've seen more and more of our clients move from managing the money to achieving goals, which is all about planning. But I think the next rung of the ladder, peace of mind, is about health and wellness. And there's a lot there that is left to be unpacked. Like, if you think about a baby boomer, they may be financially ready to retire, but are they ready from a quality of life perspective? So I think an advisor can lean in on that. And then really multi-generational planning about leaving a legacy. That's the fulfillment. So I think helping our clients progress in that and moving up the value stack, that's the first. The second area I think is incredibly important for me, passionate and personally, is when I think about diversity and inclusion, I think our industry has to recognize, the components of whether it's financial literacy. So that's a big part of, for me, outside of work as much as it is inside of work, is what can we do to help our advisors and the firm leaders out there that are go listen to this message, to think differently about the talent and also who are you serving from an investor perspective. We have to change that. We have to think bigger about, and that requires a lot of culture change. And then the third, I talked about a little bit, we're passionate about the next generation investor at Fidelity, helping our clients really evolve and think about how to go after that. But that's going to be a sea change. I talked about that $9,000 to serve a client. How do you rethink that? Because it needs to get down to perhaps $2,000 initially, or to know which investor is the right one for the next gen that's going to have good savings rate, that is not going to cost as much to serve for the long term. That's the right one to engage with. So those are my big 3. Again, moving up the value stack, diversity, inclusion, and then next generation investor.
That's awesome. Look, we only spoke for 15 minutes, but we covered a lot in that time together. So thank you so much for sitting down and having this conversation. Thank you as well to Fidelity for the amazing partnership really going back to day one, all of us within the Dynasty ecosystem. So much appreciate it. And thank you to all of you again for tuning in to another edition of Around the Track.